Hello, so in chapter 1 of the reading, I was kind of looking at little things and I kind of picked out. So first one is on page 7, and it basically says to gather basic information from your students when they first arrive, and I kind of took that as like learning their culture, their language, their religion, their customs and food, like to kind of get a better feel of who they are as a person. And maybe even that would help like build background knowledge or do research for ourselves to kind of understand our students, just so there isn't like this gap there. It also talks about creating activities to get to know your students. On page 9 it mentioned an activity called All About Me, which is where the students kind of describe themselves, tell about their life and stuff like that. And it kind of reminded me of the My Name activity, which is something I did in school. It's kind of like you kind of say what your name means, how you got your name, why your parents chose that name for you, and so forth. And I feel like people in general have a lot of pride in their names. I know I do, for instance. Don't like when people pronounce my name wrong. Kind of irks me a little bit, but yeah, just kind of even asking the students how to pronounce their name would probably close the gap as well, since there is going to be kind of a language barrier with students that are learning English and maybe a different form of pronunciation. On page 13, it talked about how, as a teacher, you should be able to participate and observe your classroom in order to gauge how to interact with your students and determine what kind of class you have. And that kind of relates to different behaviors from not only just yourself, but not just from the students, but yourself as well, and the classroom atmosphere. So looking at that, it kind of got me thinking about how in certain classes you engage with the teacher differently or interact or have different conversation depending on your relationship with that teacher. And I just think that's important, that we should be able to observe each of our students, because you're not going to have the same conversations with every student. Some students may want to have as little conversation with you as possible, which I have had that experience where I tried to help a student. They were kind of just like, no thanks. And sometimes that'll happen, and it just is about observing their behavior and how to actually get that student to talk more. Another big thing I looked at was allowing time after asking a question. Students need time to process these questions, especially if they are English learners. And it's not because they're slow or anything, or it just takes longer for them to translate it in their brain in order to formulate a solid answer, or an answer that they feel is correct. And you can even, by allowing time, you can even say, or I can come back to you if you need more time, which is like things I've even experienced in college, where I have an answer, but I need more time to formulate how I want to present that answer to my teacher or the class. Another one was forming a sense of community amongst your students. And on page 21, they kind of gave an example of how to do that by like assigning seats that don't change frequently, or assigning groups to form comfortability with each student and with each other. So assigned seating, I've definitely had assigned seating where I would be sitting next to the same 2 people or 3 or 1 person, or in a group cluster with the same people for maybe a month, and then it switches. And I think that's a great way to form community, because then each student is comfortable with each other. It's not just like they're getting comfortable with one set of students or their friends, or they're kind of like branching out. And I kind of just think chapter 1 altogether was just getting us to think about how we want to form that community with our students, how Are we going to be able to interact with them, engage with them, form a relationship, and so forth? And I think that's really important. And that's pretty much all I gathered from chapter 1. Not all, but most of what I gathered from chapter 1.